Specifically
But
with the work that you did for Alec and Bacchus and From Hell, were you approaching the page? Did you do it in the classic kind of comic book way where you put down pencils and then you inked on top of that?
yes, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
That by necessity it had to be done that way. By necessity, you could only print black ink lines. So, what was the most workable, efficient way to put black ink lines on a page? The answer to that is to pencil them first and then put the ink lines on and then rub. When the ink is dry, mind you, um, erase the ink, the pencil marks. And the way to find out, the quickest way to find out whether the ink is dry is to rub your sleeve in it.
Were you using nibs and brushes, or were you using technical pens, or were you using all of them?
Yeah, I use all those things. I remember back in the day we were I had an art assistant, Pete, worked with me daily, but we used to get through those nibs. We get through the nibs so quickly. Yeah, I used to buy them by the gross. I'd buy a box of 144 nibs, and we used to throw a couple away every week. We'd use them until they get just slightly too loose. Throw them out, put another one on the on the holder, and off you go. And when you put a new one in, you've got to put a match under it because I don't know how they I don't know what they do at Macon. There always seems to be an oil on them that rejects the ink. Um, just burn that off with a match, and then in you go. Dive in, get started. But I haven't used those in years. That's very 20th century. Ink is a 20th century idea.
Uh,
Paint.
what about the textures that you used
I
on?
have a I have a pencil, but I can't remember where it is. It's around here. So I don't use them anymore. Sorry, what were you saying?
What about the textures that you use in the backgrounds, specifically on From Hell? It seemed like you're doing some kind of rubbing or some kind of like almost charcoal kind of texture on the background.
Oh, on those, I used a linen textured art board, and I used crayon. I used black crayon, dark crayon on it, charcoal. Charcoal was too messy. I tended to use black wax crayons because they didn't leave a complete and utter mess with fingerprints everywhere. But because of its raised surface, see that the raised part of the surface catches the little flecks of black, reproduces those as solid black, and gives you a texture, a grey texture, what looks like a grey from a couple of feet away, but it's little tiny black marks. I used that on two of the chapters in From Hell. I did all the pages on those. The nice thing about that paper was that you could still use nibs on it. The nibs didn't catch on the linen surface. I was worried about that at first. I thought this linen surface is going to catch the point of the pen, and then it'll be disaster. There'll be ink splattered everywhere. But I used those nibs so lightly that they barely touched the surface. They created such fine lines that it was like the silvery smear on the surface that a moth's wing would leave. I took great pride in those hatched areas where you had to do it very quickly, with the lines closely packed together, very very light. And it would create a silvery sheen on the page. That's what I liked to go for.
And you also use a lot of mixed media and collage, right? Like it seemed like there's some photocopies in on the
I'm
page.
interested, I'm interested in picture making, and uh, I do whatever was necessary to make a picture do what it needed to do. I remember once when Bacchus was lying on the beach on the island while he's asleep. These little the vegetation and vines start to sprout around him, and I found that the way to create this sprouting effect was to dribble house paint on the onto the page off the end of a stick. You know, I'd stir the paint to the right, a big pot of black house paint to the right consistency. It was a devil because you only get one go of it on the artwork. So I'd have to do it a few times on sheets of newspaper until I was absolutely sure I could do this thing. And then I'd dribble this black house paint onto the page. The problem then was that it must have been like an eighth of an inch thick on the paper, and it just took ages to dry. So I'd have to leave that paper off lying flat somewhere for it to dry, and hope that a cat didn't sit in it.
And were you also pasting photos?
Yeah, I'd paste it.
Yeah.
I'd paste anything on the page. A bit of wallpapers. Yeah, it's just the joy of making a picture. So many the joy of making a picture is hard to find in comics these days. So many comics, they just seem to be rushing full tilt to some finishing point where there's always fragments of pictures, a little bit of this, a bit of somebody's ear, and a bit of somebody's eyebrow, and nothing's legible in itself. And I think every picture should be a legible picture. I don't mean it should be neat and tidy. It can be a mess, but it's a picture, and everything is necessary to know about that picture is in the picture. It's not in another picture. Everything relevant to what's happening in this one is in this one. If something's not immediately relevant, we can save that. But everything you need to know is in this one here. Who's doing what to whom? Who is in it and whom is in it, and what they're doing is in it.